afternoon and welcome to the cyber. Who are we?
We're the cybersecurity agony uncles. Good afternoon. No, morning. It's still a morning.
Is it morning? It's still
Yeah,
morning. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
it,
So
it must be a Wednesday. I
it
never
must.
did get
Yeah,
hang
it
on
must be a
Wednesdays.
Wednesday, and I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. So Uncle Rich, what's today's question?
Okay, so the question today is as follows. Dear agony uncles, I work as a security engineer for a company that has put out a massive RFP for cybersecurity services. On the surface, it looks like an open competition, and several businesses have been invited to submit proposals. But behind the scenes, the higher ups have already chosen who's getting the contract. So much so that the winning vendor actually wrote the RFP themselves, and we even paid them consulting fees to do it. I can't shake the feeling that the other businesses are wasting their time and resources bidding on something they have no chance of winning. Is it unethical to let them believe they have a shot? Should I find a way to discreetly warn them? Or is that just asking for trouble? Signed, feeling guilty in cyber.
Oh, I think that's very interesting. I think so. As always with these things, there's quite a lot to unpick in that one. So first of all, I would say it isn't unusual for um, a company to use experts to help them create the RFP. And I don't think that that's necessarily unethical, so long as the process of selection is then transparent. Um, it's one would hope that um, that it would be possible to just go to market and get the best. But one of the biggest problems I found with using RFPs to buy cyber services is that cyber services are almost never suitable for an RFP process. I mean, they are almost all of them, 80-90% of them that I've been involved with, both on buying and selling, have required a consultative approach from the potential suppliers because it's complicated. If you go into an RFP because you want to buy widgets and you can define widgets quite well, as in, they look like this, they do that, they're made out of this stuff, and I want 10,000 of them, what's your price? That all makes sense. Cybersecurity services are not, ours are different from any of our competitors, and they're different from each other. The devil's in the details. So actually understanding what you're buying is very difficult if you go through an RFP process. And to some extent, the more that you abstract the suppliers from the process, the less likely you are to end up with something that will actually work, in my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things with cybersecurity services is that there's more than one way to deliver them,
Yeah.
and a rigid RFP process, as you say, I want 10,000 widgets. Here's the exact spec of them. Doesn't really apply. I mean, for a lot of cybersecurity work, yes, there are best practices to fall back to, but when it comes to engaging with service providers, a service can go from being completely standardized to being completely bespoke and everything in between. And there's no guarantee you're going to get what you want. I mean, obviously, the danger with having a vendor writing your RFP documents is that obviously they're playing into their own strengths and you're not going to get what you actually need. But the difficulty with that is, of course, that if you're, how do you know what you need?
Yeah.
Do you hire a consultant to tell you what you need? Are they just basically setting things up to sell more of their services? Who knows? And one of the problems with RFP processes in general, as you said, Stephen, is that it takes all the consulting out of it.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of the scoping out of it. So when there's more than one way to skin that particular cat, who's to say who's right and who's wrong? Is it somebody who's not experienced enough on the client side? Is it an outside contractor or a vendor? got in specifically to run this process. You just don't know. But one of the interesting questions that was asked is, does this engineer go to these other vendors who are also in the process competing for that contract? Does he go and warn them and say, look, you're not playing on a level playing field here?
That they will be well aware.
Yeah,
They'll know already. They, in their own way, they'll be playing the game to the best of their ability. If it's so obvious they're not going to get it, they won't bid. They'll know, especially as soon as they see the RFP. They'll know how that's. You can determine quite quickly how that's been drawn up.
yeah,
Um, if you look at
absolutely.
it, and the other side of it is, well, you could say to them, look, don't bother because it's already been stitched up. But we know that bidding for things where it's already stitched up, actually, you have an opportunity to be disruptive. And we quite often are. There are times when you may not be able to win a deal, but you may be able to prevent whatever is about to happen from happening, and get the customer to then go back to a consultative approach around what they really need. Now, if you win it at that point because you've done the best consulting and you've got the best match of solutions to risks and issues, well, all well and good. If you don't, well, you don't. So it's unfortunately, I think just run with it. If the other vendors really feel like they've got no chance, they won't put any effort into it, and they will be aware, definitely, that when they look at the style of the questions and they unpick the RFP. There are no suppliers out there that I'm aware of that are naive enough to think that somebody somewhere hasn't been involved in it, unless you look at it and it's very clearly being driven by somebody internally in the customer. It's usually pretty obvious when that's the case.
Yeah,
In which case, you are, then you know that you're on a reasonably level playing field, but you equally know that what's being asked for is probably not what's really needed.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, just like you can tell when a document's been created by AI, you can tell when a RFP document has been created by a vendor to allow them to sell their wares.
Yeah,
I mean, half the time you'll find a bullet point list that matches what's on their sales page on their website. It can be as transparent as that, you
yeah,
know.
no, absolutely, yeah, it can
But
be. But equally, though, you may look at it and go, well, actually, we can do this as well, or in fact, we may be able to offer the same service better. We may be able to offer the same service cheaper. So it isn't a done deal. It isn't necessarily a done deal, even if it looks like it's a done deal. And some are, some aren't. You win some, you lose some. I don't think that the other vendors are going to be unduly upset about it, and they certainly won't be surprised. Almost every cyber, or in fact technology RFP I've ever been involved with on either side of the fence, the customer has had a preferred supplier going into the process. Probably 80% of the time they're running the RFP because they're told to, not because it actually adds any value, because everybody in a technology and certainly in a cyber RFP is well aware of the fact that RFP is the least likely method to get you the actual solution that addresses your real issues. Almost anything else, picking stuff out of a hat, would probably be better at getting you the service that you need. However, it is what it is. Procurement, vendor management, whoever it is, will have stepped in and aiming to justify their existence by making you run this stuff. Something comes out of it, and you can always unpick it later.
yeah, absolutely. And one of the interesting opportunities that comes up around in inverted commas, rigged RFP process, and I use that term loosely, obviously. One of the interesting things that can come out of that is that if you can tick those same boxes as the other vendor, you can then go further and actually showcase
Yeah,
your things that make your unique selling points,
yeah, exactly.
because then you'll be beating the other vendor because they've only supplied an RFP that covers the points that they wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, they're hoping that they've built in enough USPs that they're the only people that can successfully compete on it, but that's not necessarily the case, and it does depend on whether the customer wants to engage at all. So sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I mean, I've completely dissed the whole concept of RFPs, which I think is quite justified in our game. But I would say that at the other end of the scale, there are. Well, I remember one in 25 years that was well run. It was technology, it wasn't cyber. It was a very large storage area network
Yeah,
deal. It had been written by consultants, but it had been written by consultants that specialised in writing and running um, technology RFPs. Um, and they were precluded from applying, if you see what I mean. So they
yeah,
could run the RFP process on behalf of the customer, but they weren't allowed to bid for that particular piece of work.
yeah. That's
Um,
the way to do it.
and it was, I mean, that was as scrupulously fair as I've ever seen it. And because the process was outsourced to a bunch of specialists, it was actually run well, and the customer ended up with a solution that did actually give them value for money, dealt with the issues, dealt with the requirements properly, but without costing an absolute fortune. So it can be done. It's just that it mostly isn't.
Yeah, exactly. Comes down to people.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, it does.
most things do. We
Yeah.
spend a lot of time talking about those three pillars: people, process, and technology. And yeah, this touches on people and process. And
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the other thing to bear in mind is that at the scum end of the vendor market, things are won by brown paper bags full of cash, cocaine, and hookers. And we all like to laugh about this stuff, but it goes on. We all know it goes on. But equally, we all know that those sort of relationships, they don't tend to last anyway. The customer never, it only takes something minor to change, and the whole thing, it all falls apart. So, yeah, from a vendor perspective, occasionally you lose out because you don't have the best cocaine. Well, fuck it. Well, at some point, somebody will realise they actually need a decent service, in which case they'll come and talk to us. There we
yeah,
are. I've just managed to X-rate this and demonetize this
yeah,
podcast
this
in one
episode's going to
go.
go down in history, isn't it?
I can imagine Ella like with her head in her hands at the moment, going, "Oh my god, I can't let Stephen on the internet again."
Yeah, it's a marketing disaster.
Damn it!
So, just to circle back to the question, um, so this engineer says, should I go ahead and do some minor form of whistleblowing? Uh, I would say it's not worth losing your job over. As you've already covered, Stephen, we talked about the vendors knowing that it's a slightly rigged practice,
Yeah.
but I would say from their personal and professional point of view, no, don't risk your job over it. If everybody already knows it, why shout about it?
No, absolutely. I mean, if you have morals and you don't think that this is an appropriate way to do business, there are plenty of organizations. There are plenty of organizations out there that do behave completely above board. There are some very good people to work for. If the people you're working for at the moment, are not delivering the values that align with your personal values, you'll probably find it pretty easy to pick up a job somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
That gives an interesting question that, as a candidate, that you can ask in an interview, isn't it?
yeah,
Do you rig your RFPs? I'm going to add that to my list if I ever have to go and interview again.
well, I think that's quite unlikely, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's probably quite unlikely.
So we just seen we've had a comment from James on LinkedIn saying,
Oh, good comment, James.
yeah. saying that he sadistically loves a rigged RFP. So, and James has taken the approach of addressing all the other vendor elements, providing guidance for stuff that maybe they didn't do but could achieve, and highlighting a lot more value. And James says it worked
Yeah,
enough times that the team considering it have had to second think, and he's actually
yeah,
won a few. So
yeah. That's
that's
that
great. Yeah, thank you,
completely, and that's. I mean, so that's disruptive selling in a nutshell.
James.
The idea is that even though it looks like it's all stitched up, if there are ways in which you can be disruptive in that process, at the very least, you're going to make the customer stop and think again about what they really want and whether their previously assumed approach is really the right one. And you're then also doing it, as James very rightly points out, you're doing it through an RFP process, which is involving people who are hopefully not taking backhanders. So, it does give you an opportunity. Yeah. And so, yes, if you are in a position to better the offer that's very clearly on the table from whoever wrote the RFP, then yeah, you've kind of gamed the process. And again, a lot of vendors are aware of that, and you might go as far as, well, send us the RFP and we'll decide if we bid or not. Don't be from a vendor perspective. Don't be afraid to no bid things if you're obviously not going to win, because an RFP takes a lot of it takes a lot of effort internally. So you need to know that that effort is going to be applied to things that you have a reasonable chance of winning. So, no bidding things that are obvious no-brainer for you, then, don't bother with it. But if you think you can actually win it, yeah, don't worry if the customer thinks they've got it stitched up. Half the time they will have, half the time they won't.
Yeah, and don't forget the RFP process is a framework that people are supposed to stick to, but they never actually do. So if that opens up an opportunity for you to have an off the record chat on the side, and where you can ask a few questions and say things like, "I'm not sure you're going to get what you actually want to get. Let's talk about it." That can yield results, and you can, to a certain degree, possibly shape the RFP process along the way by gently massaging the potential customer.
No, absolutely. So yeah, James, in his second comment, I would agree with you on that. It doesn't work very often stepping into something which appears to have been written in favour of some other vendor, but it can be done. It's a case of identifying the ones where you look at it and go, actually, we can do that plus some. Or we've got an idea who might have written this, and we know that in a fair fight, we beat them. So let's give it a go. Um,
Yeah, I mean, the other thing with RFPs is that quite often they take a good 6 months, and a lot can shift in 6 months.
Well, we've had ones, haven't we, that where whenever you get to any particular phase, any gate in the RFP, the customer's gone back and gone, oh, actually, we're not quite sure. Let's just delay that and rewrite the whole thing and kind of start again. What's the longest we've done? It was about 18 months on a 6-month
Yeah,
RFP,
I think
wasn't it?
it was. Yeah,
Yeah, I was shambolic. I can't even remember whether I don't think we did win that one in the end. I'm not sure anybody won that one. I think in the end they just dropped the whole process and kicked the can down the road.
yeah. The whole process ruined the project.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't
Which was
I
odd.
don't
But
enjoy
I mean,
dealing with RFPs, but there we go.
no, that's it. But without wishing to get too political, the world is changing very rapidly right now. Oh, that's exciting. Yes,
That was silenced. I don't know why that rang.
I was about to be very serious then for a second.
Be serious.
Yes. So the world is changing very fast. Looking at today's headlines, looks like China's maneuvering themselves or posturing to get themselves on a war footing. If you've got an RFP process running over 6 months, you might find it, and specifically with cybersecurity, you might find that your entire threat actor profile has changed in that time. So
Yeah,
therefore, your requirements might be different.
yeah,
So that's the other problem with long RFP processes in cybersecurity.
yeah. I think I'm very much more, from a um, from a looking at things through the customer lens, I really feel it's much better to engage in a consultative approach. The people you would go out to RFP for, go out to and talk to them about how they would address your issues. Get
Yeah,
them, get them to independently help you to define what your issues really are, because they may all have slightly different takes on it, and it gives you the opportunity then to work out what you really need and what you're really trying to do. Um,
yeah,
and the final thing on that is that actually, when push comes to shove, the fact that somebody is responding to an RFP almost guarantees that the customer believes they can solve the problem. Right? Or well, okay, no, not quite. I'll caveat that. They're either there because they're padding, um, which is kind of what we're talking about here, or the solutions that are being proposed would work. Okay, so the decision isn't being made on solution. It's probably not being, at this point, not being made on price for a service like this, because roughly everybody is going to be in the same ballpark. And if somebody's miles out, they're almost going to get excluded because they clearly don't. They're not offering the same, either too much or too little kind of thing. So,
yeah,
but most services come in within a respectable percentage of each other. You actually win it by convincing the customer that your service is going to be better than anybody else's. So what's it going to be like in service with this particular vendor? Are they going to be focused on me as a customer? Do they do they have the right people? Do I like the people? Can I get on with them? Can I do a deal, as Trump would put it, with these people? And that, I think, is as important, if not more important, than the tend to be very clinical answers to questions on an RFP. And the final thing with the RFP is, if you're any good at answering them, you don't answer them in such a way that somebody can go yes and sign on the line and commit you to things. So you're building in a whole bunch of you're building in a whole bunch of assumptions. If you've explicitly called out the assumptions on which you're answering the RFP, at the end of the process, when you're selected, you have the opportunity to go back and test those assumptions. And if they're wrong, you have the opportunity to get into the consultative selling piece. So it's it's a whole art. It's messy. It doesn't. I really don't think it works particularly well. But there are ways around it that can result in the customer. And the most important thing is that the customer gets a solution which really addresses their actual cyber risk.
yeah, absolutely. And I don't think I've got anything to add now. I think that's it.
No, I think yeah, I think that's kind of covered it from my perspective as well. So yeah, all that leaves us to say, I suppose, is thank you for tuning in, or whatever people do to podcasts, and hope you have a good month, and we'll be back again next month.
Yeah,
Cheerio
see
from
you
me.
next time. And it's cheerio from me. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.